NuMinds Nation. Welcome to another conversation, another platform that we call the NuMinds Podcast, where we have inspiring, enlightening conversations on, very important topics. And I can't imagine a more topical moment than this. And we have, as a very special guest today, actually a longtime friend, but also a colleague at NuMinds. On the show today, we have our NuMinds area director for the Washington, D.C. area, Barbara Owens. In addition to being, in addition to us at NuMinds being lucky enough to have her as a director for the last few years, she's a longtime educator. She is a certified grief recovery method specialist. She is the founder of a new nonprofit called Helping Hands, which she'll tell us about a little bit later in the talk. And really, we're here today to have an open and kind of honest conversation about something that's undeniably important in this moment. And it's the Black Lives Matter movement. It's racial injustice and inequity. And because at NuMinds, our focus on our platform is education, we're going to center the conversation today about equity in education and what can we do as educators, as parents, as allies. And it's just a conversation. I'm here to hold space for Barbara to talk, to listen, to learn. And so with that said, Barbara, thank you so much for coming on the show this week. It's an honor.
Thank you, Ben, for inviting me. I'm excited to be here with you.
Yeah. So like I said, and I want to be totally transparent with everyone watching today, I'll admit I'm very nervous about this conversation.
Yeah.
As a leader, as a CEO, as an ally, I feel a huge level of responsibility to be authentic and to hold my platform, in a fair and open way. And so I don't know exactly what to ask. I don't know exactly how to approach the conversation, but I do take great comfort in the fact that you and I are longtime friends. We have a good comfort level. So I would really like it to feel like a natural conversation and just see where it goes, see how we can maybe help each other through the conversation and what we can learn from this. So just, I guess to open the conversation, to open the door, let's just say, for the record, the issue and the topic of inequity in education is a long history that's very complex and complicated, going, back to segregation and desegregation and beyond. Neither of us are historians. And so I just want to set the stage. We're not here necessarily to retell the history completely. If that comes up, that's fine. And we're not here to kind of serve as a documentary on the history. There's so many beautiful voices out there right now retelling and re-educating that, right?
Yeah, that's right.
So where would you like to start the conversation as an educator, who works with students of color? What do you think are the biggest obstacles in this moment? And we can talk specifically about the Corona moment, but just in general, the 2020, what are the greatest obstacles to equity?
Wow, Ben, there are so many. And you're right, this is not a new topic. The inequities have been for decades. And so I think as we talk about this moment, I'd like to first talk from the perspective of a mom. I'm a mother to 3 children, and thank you. I am a long time educator, but one thing I would always tell my parents in every first parent meeting, that big day when school opened and you have that first parent meeting and everybody is a little nervous and you're introducing yourselves and they really want to know about you. They don't really care about the class. They want to know about the person that's standing in front of them, right? One line that I would say every year is, I am a mother before I'm a teacher. So as I stand in front of your children, you can always know I would never say or do anything to your child that I wouldn't say or do to my own child. Because I love my children. And so because I love my children, I'm able to see your child and put my child's face on your child's head. Because I love children. And I feel that my work as an educator is a calling. It is my purpose for being on earth. And so that is always my starting point. I had no idea growing up in Dallas, Texas, that I was getting a poor education.
Mm.
That we didn't have the best of everything, and that the school needed, there was disrepair, and, you know, um, we took buses, local buses. We went to the high school. We could walk to the lower and the middle school, but the lower school was a pretty far walk for me as a very young child. And I think about that walk now. There's no way I would have let my children walk the distance to elementary school that I had to walk from my parents' house in Oak Cliff. So, yeah, those disparities have been for a long, long time. When I fast forward to 2020 with the coronavirus, we all had to move fast, right? Then we had to think fast on our feet, right? We had to come up with, so now how do you teach online? We were trained to teach in the classroom, not on computers. So I really think the hardest part was just trying to envision how to do it. And I think because there was just a struggle amongst admins, like, what do we do now? But no one was actually saying, I don't know what the heck I'm doing. And that was kind of my call. Like, why can't we just be honest and say we don't know how to do this? And let's say that to the parents. Let's say that to the students. Let's say it to ourselves. Let's say it within the confine of the administration meetings. We don't know what we're doing. So if we start from an honest point, at least we know that the children, the parents know we're operating authentically, right? And that was really important. But then we had the issue of the distance learning required that the kids have laptops. And you can give them the laptop, but there's no Wi-Fi. So when we were figuring it out, I learned that some of my students would have to sit by a certain window because they were using their neighbor's Wi-Fi, or they couldn't make it through the class. They didn't have what they needed, right? We weren't prepared for this. And so it threw us off for a loop, which caused our stress levels to increase, let alone the fact we're all afraid, I don't want to get the virus, The doctors didn't know how it was being transmitted. We couldn't go to our students' homes. They couldn't come to us. Just one day, the whole world stopped.
Yeah. It seems like a lot happening at once to kind of compound it. So like you mentioned, when mid-spring, when the virus hit and started closing schools, we had everyone scrambling, school districts scrambling, right, to go virtually overnight. And it's what you're saying, and what we know now is that disproportionately affected the learning opportunities of Black students. And is that what you're seeing? Right. Yeah.
That's right. I talked to my colleagues from other states. I'm in Washington, D.C. I talked to colleagues in New York. I talked to colleagues in Detroit. I couldn't help but ask, so what are you guys doing? How are you guys managing this? And it was hard across the board. Nobody was prepared. But some districts figured it out a lot faster than others. But the one common thread was, but the kids don't have computers. So now we as teachers are assigned to phone calls to try to do lessons over the phone. How are we going to measure these children at the end of the semester when they don't have the materials? We're holding a phone conversation. Imagine kindergarten, first, second grade, trying to do circle time over speakerphone.
Yeah. I was not aware of that, Barbara. I did not realize kind of like that strategy, the stopgap strategy of the direct traditional phone calls.
That's right.
Really fascinating to even imagine, like you said right now, how effective that could possibly be.
Yeah. And yet these children are going to be held to a standard. Whatever that standard is, it is not a fair one. I guarantee you that, because there were families, of course, in the district they always had tutors.
Mm.
But then there are these other families that can never afford tutors. I mean, this is a matter of food and bills and, keeping the lights and water on. So that meant your child really needed to listen to what was going on in class.
Yeah.
If you listen to what's going on in class, then I don't need to pay extra money for a tutor. And that's not always true.
Yeah.
Some children just need added support, but parents couldn't afford it. It's not offered in the public schools, many of them, unless you have an IEP, and then that's not good, right? That shouldn't be the only way. It should just be across the board. Every child should get what they need when they need it.
I want to, sorry to interrupt, Barbara. I want to jump back to something you said a while ago about this extra stress right now, because nowadays, of course, we know that the physiological effects of stress on the body and on the brain, and how it can impact learning, and the parts of the brain that are activated and are deactivated by stress and cortisol levels. And so this moment, I mean, already, and join that with the research on the stress effect of racism itself, right? And then add to that this layer of corona and sudden quarantine, and you've got almost a perfect storm here of terrible learning conditions and a terrible platform for new learning. And to top that off, and then I'll stop talking for a second. To top that off, we have, like you mentioned, this phenomena already there of the summer slide. We know all students across the board lose academic progress during the summer months, right? That's disproportionately high for Black students and other students of color. And there's a big worry out there now, as you know, about how is this going to just exacerbate that already significant summer slide. So
that's right.
What kind of conversations have you had, Barbara, with colleagues and others about, how to possibly address this right now?
Yeah, so the conversations that I've had with my colleagues, specifically around African American children, is this. So the greater world was stressed by OMG, the coronavirus. We're fighting a war that we can't see. It's like wearing a blindfold and wearing a mask and fighting the air. But think about children, of Black and brown children. They are stressed every day. They don't have breakfast. They have to dress themselves. They're walking to school alone because the parents must be at work. So two things. These children have been living stress. This is how they live, right? Homework not done, no support at home, broken families, abuse. That's real. But then top that off with, so the number of African Americans who died, right, from the coronavirus, the numbers were just off the chart. And the doctors are saying, well, it's because they had these underlying conditions. That was never addressed through the health care, right? And, down with Obamacare. Well, I think, these children were already stressed because of needing to eat food, get to school on time, latchkey. They're latchkey kids, letting themselves out in the morning to go to school and then walking home and letting themselves in, right? Figuring out a snack. So you couple that with the world saying, oh, we have this coronavirus, but, and it's not the children with the underlying issues. I think then that there's another issue that's not talked about enough. The African Americans are not just dying from coronavirus because they have high blood pressure, heart disease, cancer. They're frontline workers. So these kids that are leaving home by themselves, letting themselves out, hopefully eating breakfast, probably not, depending on the school breakfast. They have to do that because their parents are not parents that get to work from home. They cannot work remotely because they're service workers. They're the bus drivers, right? They are the food service people. They're the people who who have to be out front. Those are the people that are dying because they are the frontline workers. That's very different from saying high blood pressure, diabetes, cancer, or respiratory. Yep, a lot of our kids have asthma, right? They're always in the nurse's office with these asthma pumps. But a lot of their parents are out because if they take off work, they lose their jobs. So the coronavirus was killing people who were out in the public, right? Amongst the crowd. Why do we have these latchkey kids? Because their parents had to go to work.
Yeah.
That's two separate conversations. And our Black and brown children, they were always stressed. So I'm willing to bet they're managing being home better than kids who were not stressed, because they have to stay in the house anyway because their parents are at work. They don't get to play outside on the street because their moms and dad, and I'm telling you, I'm from this community. We could not go outside always because by a certain time you need to get in the house. Don't let dark catch you. And with the streets being the way they are, children don't get to play outside. They don't ride bikes. You know, they don't play with rocks. They are taught when you get out of school, you go straight home, you lock the door.
Yeah.
This is how they live anyway.
Yeah.
Right?
Interesting. Yeah. And I'm wondering, that makes me think about, we know there's so much benefit to just exploratory learning and play and touching things and being outside building things and being in the grass and climbing trees, and the narrative that you're painting, shows that that's a really restricted lane. Right. For African American kids in the latchkey system. Yeah.
Yeah. My years that I taught in Brooklyn, New York, I had so many children that would tell me, Mrs. Owens, I don't go outside because my mother and father have to work. I'm not allowed to play outside. They would say we go out of town on the weekend. That meant they drove from Brooklyn to Queens. But they were not given the privilege to play on the street like children in other communities, because playing on the street for them could mean dodging a bullet, right? It happened so often. So playing on the street is not always an option for Black and brown kids. Then you have the other extreme, where the kids are outside on the street by themselves because their parents are at work. There is no one to say, hey, you need to go in and do your homework.
Okay, yeah.
You need to pause to take a snack. It's the same, but it's a bit of an extreme. They don't have the oversight that they need. They do not have an adult that's walking them through processes of giving them a daily schedule after school. They don't have the privilege of that because, again, the parents have to go to work. And going to work is what their survival is, and taking off work could mean losing their jobs. So it's the Black and brown parents that are the frontline workers, and those are the folks that were dying.
Yeah, and then to add that whole layer of stress for the kids who know that their parents are, frontline workers. And that just compounds it.
And I wonder if I could just mention one other thing. And I'm an early childhood teacher, but one of the things that's outstanding for me, Ben, is in the life of the older students, they walk in their buildings and there's a police presence. There's a police presence in the high school. Now, we know that policemen are trained to be policemen. They're not trained to manage students. So because they're not trained to manage students, the Black and brown students, they face more violence in their high school, right? Because these officers are aggressive in the high school. So if you walk into a building in Washington, D.C., as soon as you walk in, me or the student, it can be you, and you're not Black nor brown. But when you walk in, you have to put your book bag on that belt. You are going to get warned. You're going to get patted or whatever it is they do. But the teachers, the students, the custodial workers, everyone goes through this process. But these officers are not trained to work with students. They're not trained on brain age and to understand development and, children behavior and, the hormones of a high school kid. They're trained to react and to respond, right? What usually happens in the high school is they're not like casually responding, they're reacting. So these students are facing violence just showing up at school because that police presence is there when they walk through the door. It's not one officer, there are usually two or three.
Yeah, and then again,
the life that they live.
And then that sets, again, talking about the brain chemistry, that sets the stage for the entire day of potential learning. You've triggered the fight or flight response. The stress hormones are already on.
That's right.
I can't even imagine how that translates into an environment for learning for them.
Right. And you're supposed to enjoy it, right? You're supposed to enjoy learning and feel safe in your school. But the children don't feel safe in their school. In fact, they're not safe in their school. If you place the wrong officer in that building, somebody's child is going to get hurt. And that has happened too many times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's part of the narrative that we often don't hear. We hear a lot about, incidents with police brutality in the streets and things like that. But in schools, I don't believe that we hear about that.
We don't hear about that, and it's happening every day.
Yeah.
Right. So you have that now with the added pandemic.
Yeah.
And the children are still expected to meet standards, to perform, you get your homework online, go onto your Google Classroom or Zoom or whatever it is. But what do you do when the family doesn't have Wi-Fi?
Yeah. Yeah. So Barbara, every family is unique, but how do you see some of the families adapting or coping? Is it kind of like hands in the air, I give up, I don't know what to do, desperation? Are they like kind of hunkering down and saying, okay, let's just keep chugging away and do what we can? Right. I imagine it's frustration.
There's a lot of frustration. And, my husband and I work in ministry in Washington, D.C. And the biggest message we could share with parents is, you know what? You're your child's first teacher. And this was so hard for parents. I mean, I can't imagine having young kids during COVID-19. And I deem myself, like this mom who, had all the routines for her kids. I can't imagine. You are working full time and you need to teach this phonics lesson.
Yeah.
Or you need to fulfill, some social studies research. And these parents were very, very stressed. But you know what? I saw parents rise to the occasion. And something that I would constantly say in our educational program is, listen, these parents send us the best students that they've got. Every parent loves their child. This is the best child that they have. So this is who they send us. You have to rest assured that they're going to do everything they can to make sure their children get the best education that they can give them. So parents became teachers overnight, / cook, / the nurse, / the psychologist. Yeah. And I saw parents doing a phenomenal job. They did rise to the occasion. But I'm happy for them that school's at, it's summertime because they need a break.
Yeah. So actually that's kind of my next question. So what is the effect of summertime? So the pressure's off for them to be the teacher, but you still have the issue of, a lot of them are frontline workers. They still have to go to work during the day. Now the kids are home without kind of the school semi-structure that they had before. What are the implications for summertime now?
Well, some of us will be offering tutoring. One of the things that I will be doing over the summer, Ben, is I will be tutoring students. So there will be lots of online flyers because the children still need help. The summer slide happened in the spring during COVID-19, right?
Right.
Students that really were doing well in terms of just reading on a level, we saw that go backwards. So I think we as educators will have to run extra hard to make sure that we give them just a little bit more and that we touch them just a little bit more often. So I'm highly recommending online camps because openings are still in phase one in many states across the country.
Yeah.
So I think online camps are a way to go. I know we don't want our students to have too much screen time in the summer, but just give them something, right?
Yeah.
And let them play outside, even if it's in their backyard. Go for walks, explore your community with your child, be with them, for those inquiries and while they explore, and do community service with your child. I think that's the best education. We have some students here that their families volunteer to help clean the Anacostia River. That's a great thing to do. I mean, the river's always there. The river's always dirty.
Yeah.
There's always something to do, right? Clean up your local park. That's education for your child.
Yeah.
Take them to the grocery store with you. How many purple vegetables can you really find in the produce section?
Yeah.
You're not going to find a lot of purple, but you're going to find some purple, right? That's education. But I really am advocating for online camp and online tutoring because we don't have too many summer schools.
Yeah, that's great. And I mean, as you know, NuMinds has created an online summer camp for that reason, to reach as many kids as we can. And as you and I have already discussed offline, that still doesn't fill the gap of those students who don't have the online access or the Wi-Fi. And
that's right.
And we're still working on how to solve that problem,
Yeah. But the nice thing is in the summer, so I'm not sure about Dallas, but the libraries are opening back up. You can sit outside Starbucks and have free Wi-Fi.
Yeah.
There are some options of free Wi-Fi, right, that parents may not have been able to access during COVID-19. So taking the children to the library is paramount.
That's a great point. That's a wonderful
giving them that opportunity, right? Yeah. And there are all these great competitions of how many books you read in the summer, and the library is giving wonderful rewards and stickers and coupons and books to children. These are the alternatives that we should be using. It's not electronic. It's literally a book, right? We're going back to some basics that I think will give our children a great foundation.
Yeah, I love that. That's beautiful. And then since we're kind of projecting now kind of into the future, I know no one really knows exactly how the fall is going to look at school districts around the country. What are the implications of some of these different scenarios that you see? Like, we've both heard lots of different possibilities. For example, maybe it's alternate days, like, half the kids go each day, then they have a virtual learning day, and then back. Maybe it's every day is a half day. I've even heard all virtual until November. I've heard it all basically under the sun. For you, some of those scenarios, how do they play out for African American students in particular?
Well, I've been hearing some of the same scenarios, that they will alternate days. Some kids will go half days. The program where I work, Chance Academy, which is a wonderful homeschool collective, we're still working it out. We may still be doing distance learning because many of the churches where private education programs usually are housed, they're not open. The churches need to be safe for not only students and parents, but for the instructors, right? Look at the loss of teachers in Brooklyn, New York. It was just teachers, principals, devastating, right? So we need to make sure our spaces are safe. And if they're not, to use your words, let's err on the side of human, and let's continue with the distance learning until we have more information. So we've been informed, even for our own children who are on campuses, the first semester will still be online learning.
Yeah.
So
that being said, if we just assume virtual for the fall, learning the lessons that we've learned now in this kind of experimental phase this spring, what could we do as educators, or as a system even, to make the experience more smooth and better for students in the fall? And what's your opinion based on what you've seen this spring?
Yeah. First, I think we absolutely must meet the children where they are, right? Not everyone understood how to work on these platforms. We kind of just threw it down their throats, right? But now these children, in a very short time, they became experts. I think we have to work very hard to take the stress out of the process. So, if these children have 6 classes, you're not going to give them 6 hours of homework. It just wouldn't be fair for them to be on the computer all that time. It's not good for their brain, right? So we have to have a different mindset around teaching and learning. I think that's going to be very, very important. I mean, I was taught very traditionally. I'm thinking you were too. We were both public school teachers for a lot of years, right? So in my mind, there was one way to do it, the public school way, right? And it's all about driving data and preparing for testing and, assessments and dibbles and this and that, instead of let's teach this whole child. There is such a great lesson in what it means to have a dialogue, teaching them how to speak and listen to one another. That's huge. Right. And I think in terms of young children, right, managing first and second graders on Zoom was not simple. Right.
I know. Yeah.
So we had to take a few step backs. And the thought that came to my mind was, well, what do I do when I'm in the classroom? I start out the school year with, hey, let's create some norms so we can figure out how to live in this space together. So we approached our scholars and we said, we have to create Zoom norms. How do we want to conduct ourselves and show love and respect to each other, even though we're on a computer, right? Well, we can't all talk at one time. Maybe you can mute your mic when other people are talking, right? It's really hard sometimes to see what you're showing me on the camera. Maybe you can have your mom email it to me or take a screenshot with her phone and send it to me. Then I can really answer the question because I can see what you wrote.
Yeah.
I think the other thing that we can do is really educate ourselves as instructors on how to use the platform to make it so friendly for the children. Yeah, because it's hard to talk at them, right? Young children need to see books and they need to actually see the passages in the paragraphs, right? So people weren't so proficient on Zoom. And Zoom kind of wasn't so trustworthy after week 2 or 3, right? We had some Zoom bombing going on. It wasn't safe for students. So I think we, the educators, have to educate ourselves on the platforms that we're teaching on and have a lot of grace for the families.
Taking the lessons learned from this spring,
right,
and going into the fall or the next iteration with those best practices kind of ready to go,
right,
establishing the norms for teachers and for the kids.
That's right.
And I have to go back to your beautiful statement about whole child teaching and what an opportunity this is to reframe our approach to data, reframe our approach to learning outcomes and measuring outcomes.
That's right.
And think in terms of the human child. I mean, I love that. This opportunity in that sense.
Yeah. One of the greatest, I think the thing that I hold near and dearest to my heart that came out of COVID for me, we were all reset, right? Because there was a hard stop. It was a complete worldwide pause. And I just remember those mornings when I was younger and teaching, like, oh, I have to go to work and I have to deal with children that are irate and I have to write all these lesson plans and I have to do this and that. I'm very honored to say that my language changed because this was hard for children and it was hard for parents. And I saw parents melting down. And I talked to moms who said, sometimes I had to just go sit in my car and cry the only space I could find, right?
Mm.
Because I was so overwhelmed with my job and my child and the housework and so many meals. I'm doing so much food shopping. My Instacart bill is, out the window.
Yeah.
My language changed. Not have to, but I realized because I'm home and I get an opportunity to feel my skin and my space, it changed to now I get to Zoom a child one-to-one, or I get to see the whole class, right?
Yeah.
Now I get to talk to the parent about any concerns he or she may have, or I get to have a platform meeting where everyone's invited. I get to have meals with my husband, who travels all the time for work, but there was no traveling, right? So I get to make these creative meals. And I had the opportunity to even share the meals with some of the parents. This may take a little bit of ease out of their day. Here's some really cool snacks I've been making that are really, really healthy. I get to now share not only with the student, but with the parent.
Yeah.
I had a parent that, English was a second language. She was a single mom, and this student struggled during the school year in the building, so he needed a lot of support. But this mom had to leave for work at 6:00 every morning. She had this child that was our grade level, and then she had her high school child who was very angry because she didn't have a laptop to do her work. So she was doing everything on her cell phone.
Oh my goodness.
And that's another thing. Many of the Black and brown children, the high schoolers, they were doing everything on their cell phone because they didn't have Wi-Fi laptops.
Yeah.
Well, I got an opportunity to talk to this mom on Friday nights because by Friday she would just be so stressed, trying to figure out, I didn't know everything the teacher was talking about. I didn't understand the lesson that my son was given, and I only had his lens. And so I got an opportunity to create this routine of just calling her. And so, this is what we did this week. And this is what the teacher meant when he asked him to do this or that. And let me know if I can just go through the lesson with your son. I'll just go on FaceTime with him because the mom had an iPhone. Hey, let's just talk. You're in your living room, I'm in mine. Ask me anything you want to ask so we could do work together, right?
Yeah.
So what I have to work with this boy one-on-one, but now I get to. And it's just words have such power. And if we just reframe our words, then we capture the heart of our children.
I love that, Barbara. And as much as a reframe of words, it's a reframe toward gratitude. And you and I, in fact, we're talking this morning on a separate call.
Oh, yeah. That's our thing, right?
The power of gratitude. And
yeah.
I love how you've framed that way. It's beautiful.
Yeah. Thank you.
Now, I want to ask, we can't end our conversation without me asking this. It just, from your point of view, what are some things that allies can do, allies like me, who are not Black or brown, but who are allies of Black Lives Matter, who are serious about justice and equality? What are some things that we can do in this education space in particular that you feel would be effective?
Let me share a quick story, and I'm going to get to your question.
Yeah.
When I left New York City, I moved to Cleveland, Ohio. And I think I will not name the district that I worked in, but I was the only African American teacher in the building. And I thought it would just be for a little while, but it wasn't. Year 5, I was still the only African American teacher in the entire building. And this building had a history of long-standing teachers. When these teachers got an opportunity to work in this particular building, they didn't leave. They were the kindergarten teacher for 20 years in the same classroom.
Yeah.
They were the first and second grade teacher, same classroom. So here, this woman shows up on the scene. And we bought our home there, and I always believe, like living in my home, my neighborhood, shopping in my neighborhood. I got a chance to work in my neighborhood. I could walk to my school. But there were lots of angst by now having a woman of color on the staff. And yep, I got wind of the N word, and there was conversation in the teachers' lounge that I always felt was very inappropriate. And this was during the Obama's first election. And I got an opportunity to experience some things that I know that I would not have otherwise experienced had not I left New York. So I really advocated for Black and brown children because there were also white children in this building. This was one of the strongest buildings in the district. And it's a very small district. There's one high school, right? There were two middle schools, and there were four elementary schools, 3 or 4 elementary schools. I'm the only Black in this building, and Obama's running for president. Imagine that. So I worked very hard to tie it in for children. We would have mock elections, and we would talk about what this could mean if we had an African-American president. We would just talk about the implications of this and that. So I did a lot of work in that building because it was personal to me. Not only that, I had a child in that building. So I taught sometimes in my child's classroom. That was really hard, right? Yeah. So I ran into some issues of some teachers that didn't treat my son so nicely. And I witnessed some of my colleagues saying things to children that were completely inappropriate. Black and brown children, telling them what they were and what they're not and what they'll never become. And it was disturbing to me. And I had to find my way. Year 1, I laid low. Year 2, you could see my stem. But by year 3, I had a strong voice. And year 3 was the year that Obama was running. And so I worked very hard. I was in a transition, leaving New York. I wasn't back in my grade, and there was a different system. So I became, I was no longer the classroom teacher. That was really hard, really painful. So to ease into this new system, I became the building sub. Well, I'm an early childhood teacher. Well, I became the teacher that taught all 5 grades and every special that was offered in the building. So I was hired full time. I thought this was a curse. It turned out to be the best blessing. I learned every child's name in the building. I met every parent anybody that would talk to me. I would show up at people's homes at dinner time. If their child gave me a hard time, I would tell that child, you know what? Tell your mom and dad I'm coming by tonight just for a little while. I lived in a very small community. I'm going to come by, and I want to introduce myself to them. And so it became a benefit that I taught all the grades and all the specials. When the election day happened, of all days of the year, Ben, I walked in, you go to the main office, regular public school, and I was told, oh, Mrs. Owens, we received a phone call from another school, and there's a principal that just desperately need help. So we're going to be transferring you out today. This was on the day of the election. I had this big plan with this 5th grade teacher, and we were going to do this thing, keeping count of the vote. And my son was in one of those classrooms. They shipped me out for the entire day. Obama won. And then conversation in the teacher's lounge after he won, and it was not pretty, right? And the students that were the most difficult, they were always sent to me. If there was a detention, it was with these students. I was the one to manage that detention. I'm okay with it because I'm learning things that I've never done because I was kind of stuck in one grade or stuck teaching, multicultural studies for a couple of years. Now I'm learning a little bit about everybody. But you know what, Ben? When he won, I came back and I gave it 24 hours, and I just felt compelled to start covering every bulletin board in the school. And so it was January, the inauguration, right? So everybody's talking about Martin Luther King, January. That's just kind of the historical thing that we do. Like he's the only, civil rights Black person. So when you were walking the building, there was this huge billboard. It was massive, and no teacher wanted to cover it. So I covered it. And it was a giant Martin Luther King, and there was a giant Obama. And the first thing you saw when you walked in was the dream and the dreamer. And that was the topic of the bulletin board. And it said enough, right? Because now the tables and the tides have turned. It was slow and it was hard. But then it evoked conversation that we would have never otherwise would have had, right? And so what I think allies could really, really do is halt conversation that's racist. Even if it's a loved one or a friend, just be the person that says, I will not stand for racism. I won't allow the talk. I will not engage in the talk. That is not my framework. I don't agree with what you're saying. I think it takes courage to say that, because it's not going to stop until that piece is changed. And it's not just whites it's every race. We have got to change it. We have to have a heart change. You can pour money into Black nonprofits, billions of dollars, millions upon millions are being poured in right now. Well, you know what? If the hearts aren't changed, Ben, nothing's changed. We've got to bring an end to racism. We've got to bring an end to the abuse that African American males are experiencing on police departments. Somebody's got to stand up as an officer and say, hey, brother in blue, that's just completely wrong. So that, from my heart, that's what I think we need from allies, to say, I will not participate.
Yeah, that's very powerful and very heartfelt, and I really appreciate that. And your story at that school is so poignant and powerful. And I got goosebumps when you described the bulletin board, that arc of history, more MLK to Obama, and here we are in a new phase that's very difficult, that's very messy. But I think like you said, it's because it's come down into our heart now, and it's time for that heart change. And it's difficult, and conversations like this are just the beginning. I mean, I know you and I could have 3,700 of these conversations, and we still wouldn't be done. But that's okay. This was a very powerful and rich experience, and I thank you so much for honoring us with the conversation.
My pleasure. Thank you for inviting me, Ben. And you're right. We could have 3,700 of them, and they will all be equally as exciting, right?
Exactly.
Because I just enjoy the time that we spend together. It's very meaningful.
Yeah.
I just take joy in hearing in your heart, and you holding space for me to allow me to share mine. Very
Absolutely.
meaningful.
It's my honor and privilege to do so. And I can't wait to get this conversation out to others, let them kind of interact with it and be enriched by it. And also I invite anyone listening, whether you're an ally or an African American advocate, to comment, if you're watching it on YouTube or Facebook, wherever it might be, to comment with links to resources, to ideas, and just kind of let those build, because different messages are going to reach people in different ways. So the more we are exposed to and open to, I think the better. So, all right. Thank you again, Barbara. We're gonna be talking a lot this summer, because we're trying to get some virtual camps to. That's
right. And we will be very successful.
In DC. Yeah. So take care, stay safe. Thank
you, Ben,
for joining me today.
Yeah, I want you and your family to keep well, stay safe, wear your mask. It's important, not for you, but for the person that's near you.
Absolutely.
All right, take care, Ben.
Take care, Barbara. Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye-bye.